So thank you, Jackie. If we think about this Eurobarometer result, I would like to point out that this financial literacy score, it is a combination of financial knowledge and financial behavior. And because the young people, they are not familiar with those financial concepts, that's why the financial knowledge score is low. And because they are just starting their independent life in financial environment, so they are inexperienced in this financial behavior, and that's why their scores are lower. But it is not any reason they can be higher, because what we can do is when people are young, we must focus on bettering this financial knowledge. So education system is an important role in that way. But also we have to teach young people skills, financial skills, and this is really important. And there is important. Education system is important, but also parents, they have to learn, they have to teach their children.
Thank you very much. And that crucial question of who does what, but also then how do we support parents in playing that role? How do we support teachers in playing that role? Because it isn't just about the young people themselves, it's the people who will deliver the messages. Lots to come back to, but I'm very struck you talked about the skills issue. And of course, I mentioned already European Year of Skills. And this really a core life skill that we're talking about. Just in terms of building that picture of why we are where we are. KAROLIN, how do you see the current state of play and the reasons why this is so challenging?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true words, what you said. I think financial education is a really complex topic, maybe the most complex topic we have currently to face. And to start early, I think there we can all agree on. But to start early, what are the connections you want to start early? It's on the one hand, the school, and it's not implemented yet in the school. At least from my side in Germany, we still discuss this. We have starting points, but it's not a common curriculum in schools. The other column you have are the parents. You mentioned that already. But the parents, not all of the parents have that financial education and can motivate their kids to do so. You need, with the kids, you need a kind of a starting point to get them interested in. So what is the starting point when you are a kid, and to make sure that you have the right skills and you have the right motivation to learn. And then, of course, it's a lifelong learning. It's just a starting point, but that we have to get right. And then it's a lifelong learning, because life, it changes all the time. And so I think the parents, they play as well as the schools a key role in that education. But we are not there yet. We have to empower both the schools and the parents. And I think then we get the starting point for the youth, right, to get started in the financial education topic.
So really, it's about tackling both together. Adult financial education, because of course we talked earlier about the challenges and that it's the digital world, but of course young people are taking advantage of those things much more, and older people may not be able to give them the education because they don't understand them either, because they're new tools that they don't use. I'd love to come back on how we address that and how you reach the parents, because you can reach the kids through the school, but how do you reach the parents? Lots to discuss already. Roland, MONASCH, from your perspective, as I say, you work in some 100 countries around the world. From a global perspective, how great is this challenge? And I imagine some of the numbers we've been hearing for EU member states, if you take that globally, and Gabriela Ramos pointed to this, it's way, way lower levels of financial literacy. What for you are the key reasons why this is so difficult to address? Please do grab a mic. It should be on.
Thank you so much. And is it on?
He'll just pick you up. Try again.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem. It's from our perspective, as soon as children can read, write, and count, they should start learning about finance. It's such an essential skill in life. If you want to really systematically address this issue, you need to integrate financial education in national curriculum, and that should happen around the world. It's not in one country, two countries. It needs to be systematically addressed. So that also means that in international goals and commitments, we need to have this as a core target for us all to work towards. The biggest challenge is that specifically in the education sector, it's considered as a nice to have and not as an essential skill. And we really need to address this. And of course, the people here in the room are convinced, but I really appreciate that WSBI is bringing us together, because we together need to then now scheme on how can we address this with the people who are not yet convinced.
Thank you very much. But when you see how, and you've all underlined how important it is for our economies, for social inclusion, for all these different issues, treating it as a nice to have seems strange, but perhaps it's about awareness raising. We're talking about teachers, but also policymakers in some cases. Can build for me and Christine complete the picture. As I say, you're providing education programs for young people. This is one of the areas you work in. What for you are the key reasons why we're not doing as well as we might hope?
Yeah. It is a big challenge. Thank you, Jackie, for mentioning this. And I think we are quite aligned here that it starts from education. We are providing education on financial health programs around the globe in more than 100 countries. But that's not enough. We are tackling at the global 10% of the global youth. In Europe, we are tackling close to 4% of the young people that are going through financial education. It's true. One of the main issues is the education system. It's not set in a way to support and to contribute to financial literacy and financial education at the school level. Now, what we believe and what is the JA concept, General Achievements concept, it's really hands-on experience. So our kids are going through programs that are tackling different, they're developing different skill competencies, including the financial education. And this is how basically they are the main direct beneficiaries, but the parents that are the indirect beneficiaries. Parent going, her or his own child going through such a hands-on experience is actually helping to understand how actually it's important. Also financial education to transfer to their own kids, but also to understand of what is lacking in their own personal knowledge. I'll speak a bit later more about the challenges, because it's not only the education, it's also how in Europe, especially the economic systems are set up as such, and what we are finding as a new gap in terms of financial education linked with development of skills and competencies.
Can I just stick with that then for a moment and build on that? What do you mean when you say it's about the economic system?
So just to give you an example, we did a lot of research. We did a lot of research in the past with University of Vienna and Visa, and one of the findings was that we need to do intervention at the very early stage of young kids. One of the main things we believe it's really building into coalitions. We already talked. We cannot do this alone as players. We need the financial education. We need other stakeholders that are always repeating the same message, and we are identifying and tackling the same issues. This is when it's all about awareness raising at the national level, but also European level. Now, what has happened is we have programs that are running from primary school up to university level, all about skills, competencies, and financial education, because one of our main pillars out of the three is financial education. We ask young people at primary education, what would you like to be when you will grow? And they say, I don't want to work. It's easy to make money. Why? Because they are saying, I can put a video on YouTube and I'll make money. Now, the thing is that we are speaking about influencers, social media, type of professions that in our world, they don't exist, but they are highly impacting the reasoning of young kids, of young people. So wanting to admit or not, we need to tackle as a potential set of skills and competencies these influencers are developing in order to make out their business. They are self-esteem entrepreneurs. They need financial education. They are doing their comms strategy, peer strategy, how to escalate in the social network competition. they need to put a content writing. So it is a skill, right?
Lots to come back on, and really your point about influencers, and as you say, something which a phenomenon I think many of us over a certain age, I'm talking about myself, don't understand. I know, to what degree that raises for me the question of when we look at the risks young people face now, we talked about educating the adults and the children, but how unique are they? Do you see common ingredients for any strategy to address these challenges? Or is it very different when we're talking about children and young people? I mean, there are two frameworks. We're going to hear a lot more later about the framework developed by the European Commission with the OECD and their International Network on Financial Education. But is it very different, or are there some commonalities in both the risks and therefore the approaches we need to take?
There are quite a lot of same features in this both age groups. So that when we talk about when we take a look at this the economy today.
Not sure your mic is it been turned off? Can you flick up if
It's mute.
Yeah. Try again.
So
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So there are many similarities in different age groups, and what is important to understand that we are living in a global economy, and because we have a digitalized environment, and people of all ages, they have these financial transactions they are buying in digital environment. So it is important to understand how this digital environment works, and what are benefits and what are risks when we are acting in this environment. And because we also know that financial environment is changing all the time. So when we get new financial products, for instance, to the market, so it is important to understand what are those products, are those useful for me, or are those that kind of that I have to take a look at them and take them to my life. When we talk about young people, so it is important when they are starting their independent financial life, so that they understand what are those, for instance, financial services. When they, for instance, are taking their first loan, what kind of commitment is to take a loan? It has to pay back, and they have some extra expenses. They have to pay interest for them, so that they understand what are those products and what are the benefits and what are responsibilities for them in that. And today, when we know that inflation is now it is getting lower, but it has been higher in recent times, so that people of all ages understand what inflation means in my life. How do I have to take account in my life when prices get higher?
But some of those things, therefore, are identical for older age groups and younger age groups. The other issues, like, as you say, the new products, some of the digital products that young people use much more than olders are different. So you believe there's quite a lot of commonality, if I understand you correctly.
Yes.
In the approach, and then you tailor it. I want to come back on that in a little bit more detail. But Caroline, from your point of view, and I know you have programs, I think, running across the spectrum, you also have some specifically targeted at young people. Do you see the challenges very different when it comes to young people? In terms of, I mean, we can talk about the education system, and that's obviously much more talking about young people. But for you, when you're targeting your customers and potential customers, as it were, is it very different, or are there a lot of similarities in approach?
But actually not so different. And I think we have to take into account, or to talk about, there's an entirely change, I think, in our world. So we will live in a really digital, connected and sustainability-driven world. So, and I think the young generation is already living in that and adapting it. They grow up with buy now, pay later, and the short attention what they have, but they have and they understand really a lot of things we don't understand. When I think of our generation, when we think of AI, and we are thinking, oh, we are not sure about, we are maybe a bit afraid of it. The young generation is already working with it. It's like, it's not a question for them. So, and I think we need to have another connection between younger and the older generation, the role of schools entirely, the role of policymakers, and the role of parents too. It's not an education only in one direction. It's not that the parents educate the kids. Yes, in certain things, definitely. But with the entire digital world, I think that the kids need to teach the parents, and they need that too. Because when I think we have two columns in our organization, we have the programs for schools, so where we go to the young people, and we have the so-called life learning program, where we say, okay, it's important or relevant for all of us, from young to older people. And I think we have to get this right, and we have to see, okay, what is the younger generation looking at and knowing already? What can we learn from that in companies? I think we call it a cross-mentoring program. So I think that counts for parents and kids as well, or in schools. Why is there a teacher to teach the students? It can be a bit the other way around and say, look, that is how we live, that is what our interests are, that is how we use the digitalization of our world. Please adapt that in your school program. And I think if we would change that a bit, communicate differently, and be more open to all the challenges, and not talking about the challenges, about the youth, talking with them. I think that would be a bit the key to overcome the risks or challenges we see.
But you already also raised the question of who do they listen to? Because you talked about influencers and the impact that they're having, which baffles some of us a great deal. We're talking about parents who do young people to listen to, and that then links to then who is the best messengers, if you like, for not sounding as if we're preaching, but, and maybe KAROLIN is right there, if you make it a dialogue, that's part of the issue. Roland, from your perspective, and when you look at your initiatives around the world, are they very targeted at either young people or adults, or is it broader and a generally the same approach?
No, for us, we really focus on children and young people. But what we do see is in many of our programs, specifically in the more or less developed countries, is that the young people are educating their parents. And there are so many more digital tools, digital apps, banks, cooperatives, they're all going digital, but their customers, the cooperative, older members are not able to adjust to those innovations. And it's actually the young people within the cooperatives who are teaching the elderly, the older, the above 30 ones about how to use the app, how to do digital finance, etc. So they really have an important role to play as well, to take the whole society into the digital world.
Same question really to you, KRISTINA. I mean, your programs are all targeted at young people, but do you start from the premise of this is a basic challenge for society as a whole, to which we need tailored approaches, or would you say, given all the things we've talked about, no, you really need to do this very differently if we are to reach young people effectively?
Yeah. Something that KAROLIN mentioned, I think that the mentoring, it's one of the part. Across Europe, we are working with 60 financial institutions, really to build on the financial education within the schooling system. And one of the main strategic point of junior achievement is bringing and bridging the education with the world of work. We are bringing professionals inside the school who teach kids about financial education, about skills, about competencies, about how a company is running. Now, our main flag initiative is called Company Program. It's running this one, it's in a secondary school. From the time of the President Barroso was recognized as the best practice because it's hands-on practice at school, where the kids are going through a simulation of a company. Now, inside, we have financial, we have marketing. So we have a kind of set of different skills competencies the kids are developing during the year. But Jackie, I would like to speak more about challenges that we are facing when I mentioned also previously the economic system. So what's happening in Europe? In many European countries, kids at the age of 13, 15, 16 cannot open a bank account. When we go through a simulation, and this is an issue because they cannot start trading, the e-commerce now is taking over. Cash circulation is not that much. Now we are talking about e-commerce, we are talking about crypto, we are talking about different type of currencies. Now the issue is they cannot open bank account. The parents need to open the bank account. I have my colleagues in Malta, for example. The parents are saying, I don't have time to go through this admin. So my colleagues have to support them just to push on the parents, their kids to get through financial education simulation. In Germany, for example, you would probably know better than me, the simulation and our company program is the biggest in Germany. There we are facing where they need to get into social security charges. Now we are talking about simulation at school. We are not talking about a real business. These are many companies. Another thing is in Italy, for example, the simulation goes up to a turnover up to 2,000 euros. Nowadays, you can sell 2,000 pence and you will reach the 2,000 euros. After that, you are becoming a real company. So it is a big challenge, the way the entire system is set to support the financial education in Europe. So it's a challenge. I think, again, we are working a lot with the financial institutions that are welcoming and facing this challenge and helping us in, but we need, again, a coalition of partners.
I want to come back on the who needs to do what, but Carolyn, I saw you nodding emphatically there, and you also running many simulation programs as well. Your reaction to what KRISTINA was just saying?
Yeah, absolutely interesting and absolutely true. Especially, I was wondering, especially what you say about the bank account, and it's the same challenge what we are facing. But there are other, and when you look to the fintechs, to Revolut and so on, there you can have a pocket money account, and the parents can open it for their kids within 2 minutes. It's unbelievable, and they get you can put on, I don't know, 20, 25 euro. It's very limited, but they can, and they get a card, and you can design the card with I don't know what. It's really, and they with these features, let's say they have a channel to get attached to the young generation. They can design their own card. They find it very cool to have a card to go to the bakery and pay. They feel like an adult all of a sudden. And motivation. There's motivation and there's the connection, and it's somehow very easy. And when I sometimes then look to us, to Europe, to Germany, we see, let's say, a lot of challenges, a lot of risks, a lot of problems, and they are definitely there. They are definitely there. But the question is, how do we handle these kind of things? Let's say, I don't want to make advertisement for Revolut, but they just found a solution. Is it the right one or not? But I think if we would put ourselves and say, what can be a solution that we get the motivation right, that we make it easier for the parents, that we talk about, okay, 50 euro is too much, but let's talk 10 euro and whatever a card that is completely secure. So more in the solution thinking than in the problem thinking. Then we would be a step further, and I think we would then get into the dialogue that is needed to get the use on speed.
I want to come back on some examples from all of you of what you are doing, but I just wanted to focus for a moment and then maybe take a first round from the audience on what skills are we talking about? Because one of the key aims of the financial competence framework that's been developed by the EU, OECD, and the International Network on Financial Education is focusing on an agreed sort of set of what is our shared consensus on the skills you need. And Anu, I mean, this is a key area because some of these skills are also about how young people live in the social media world generally, being able to distinguish between good information and bad and so on. So is it a given that we know what skills we're talking about, or do we need more of a conversation about that before we develop the approaches? Anu first, it should be on, but yeah.
Yeah, we certainly need support in this, and just with what you were talking about, this final inclusion is crucial. We know about PISA because financial literacy has been one part of PISA survey. You know that PISA, so that there this financial inclusion is a primary explainer in financial literacy, so that when young people get their first bank account as early as possible, they learn better to take care of their financial issues and do it virtually, not with cash money. So that this is really important. We have in Finland. Okay, we come to these examples later on, but there are also when you talk about small children, they can play, for instance, running companies and that kind of, so that they get an idea that how economy works and what kind of elements there are included, so that it can be done by playing. So that this is important when children are really young, so that they learn how this how economy works and what are the main elements and what are interaction between the main elements. So I see that this is important.
It's an interesting point. I don't know the degree to which banks' sort of attitudes to these things have changed. I remember, just a small personal anecdote, my mother was a great believer in teaching you young, and at 15 gave me an allowance and said, right, you buy your own clothes, you run your own, there's pocket money, there's clothes money. I'm not, apart from presents, that's it. She went to the bank and said, I want to open an account. And they said, okay, well, we'll send the statements to you. She said, no, I don't want to see them. I want her to have the account. I'm not going to supervise this. They were horrified. 15-year-old in 1977. You don't want to see them? She said, no, I'm sure you'll let me know if there's trouble, and I'll guarantee the account. But no, she's going to run her own finances. It was it was an extraordinary thing to do, to be honest, at the time. But whether banks actually are willing to allow parents to give that much responsibility, they say at the time, they were appalled. Carolyn, you wanted to come in? It was just a quick personal anecdote about when.
Just because the skill, your example just brings me to another.
It's on, it's working.
To another idea. I thought, and it's a good question, what kind of skills do we need? And when I look at our companies, we say, okay, we need different job descriptions. We now need more this and that and that and that. But when you have a time traveler and you put him, I don't know, in the middle of Berlin or Brussels, he will be completely lost. Put him into the school, he will be safe, he will be confident because it's the same like 100 years ago. And so that is really the right thing to do. But actually, I don't have the answer. What kind of skills? That is the most important question to get that. I have an idea, but to say what are the skills we really need? It's a very, very good question.
Roland, is it something that you, in developing the programs that you have had, is this a question that you repeatedly ask yourselves?
Well, you have to reflect always, but I think the core skills that we're thinking about, that we're talking about, is really the basics and basics. We heard the very basic knowledge is not there. So you really need to first start with saving, responsible spending, making a plan, making a budget, and learning by doing, as you mentioned, together with your peers, setting up a small business or other activity to put it into action. So I think that the discussion should not really be on what is the skill set. We have the new framework for Europe. There is enough knowledge and understanding in research that financial education works. So it's really, the discussion should be on, okay, but how now do we make sure that every young person around the world is getting those skills? Because we know what needs to be done. We know that it works. Now it's really, how can we scale this intervention across countries, across the globe?
Come back on that, Roland, in a moment, but just KRISTINA, and then I will come out to you. So if you have a question or a thought to share with us, please be ready to do so. But KRISTINA, to this what skills, I just want to come back with you on the question of, as well as the basics that Roland's talking about, to what extent we also need joined up thinking with those who are teaching young people to be skeptical about what they see online, about what influencers tell them and so on. Do you think that is a skill that should be part of this discussion, or is that a separate skill about, you know, the world of the online world and so on? I mean, do you see what I mean?
I think we should always be open for any discussion, to put any subject in the room now, because it's part of the solution, but it's also part of the problem. When we speak about skills, I'm not sure, I mean, the skills, yes, the set is there. I think on the financial education, it's really a young person developing the sense of responsibility to manage something. And this is the point when we go through the simulation process that you fail, right? And there is nothing dangerous during failing. You are learning. Next time you will do better. Next time you will be there. Doing a simulation one time and saying, this is what you learn, it's not the part of the solution. But going through the process and understanding alone how you have grown through the process, develop that sense for responsibility, but also developing the skills. One of the things I think the most important is, whenever we turn around, is the financial planning and budgeting. This is one of the main foundation skills we have found out in our researches. I know that OECD is part of the same finding, part of their financial findings on financial education. But one of the things nowadays, we are talking about AI, social media, crypto. There has been a lot on failures there, just because people are tend, especially young people, to invest in something that they don't have knowledge about. You know, everyone was going into crypto, because it was bombastic on the social media, on internet, everywhere. But then people were just investing in something they don't understand. So where is the education about what is really the crypto value, the currency? Did you ever heard, unless you are really financial professional, going to such a debates and listening, but also spending time to. And this is one of the things we need to find, I think, moving forward, to understand what are the new trends and how very fast we can make intervention by educating people, not only young. This is one.
Sure. Just one other thought before I come out, and Carolyn, really addressed to you as well. We talked about inflation and understanding inflation. So we're focusing a lot here on the risks of jumping into these new innovations and so on. But we're not focusing so much on the other side, which is doing nothing and then facing rising inflation, eating into your savings and so on. And, you know, those who are actually completely risk averse and say, well, I tell you what, I just put it under the mattress. Now, that tends to be older generations. But among the young, when they've seen what's happened recently with inflation and so on, do you think that's also part of the equation? I mean, we're focusing on being responsible, but are we focusing enough on how to use these products in a way that really works for you? If we only focus on risk, is there a danger there?
I think if we only focus on risk, definitely, because then we miss out on a lot of opportunities and chances we have. And for example, we as DSGV, we do currently a lot already. So we, for example, have the stock market learning where we teach young people in a very playful way how the stock market is working. So, and we actually, it's a quite risky play, because you can lose all your money, and we make all the risk very clear, very present. But we say, here's your.
Are they using real money?
Fake money.
Fake money.
Good question. So this is why I mean it's very, very playful. So because the risks are very clear and transported and transparent, but they can learn, and sometimes we have that they lose their fake money in that time, but then they learn and then they adapt, and then they say, okay, next year we are again in the game and we did doing better because we learned it's important. Why, I don't know, Tesla is building up a company in Berlin or not. That is a decision making by one person of a company that influences the stock market. That is a huge risk and a huge lesson learned for them. And there we have many examples, and as well for it's a lifelong learning, as well as for many others. And actually, I was thinking of the real risk is how do we get it transported to the youth? Where is the starting point? So I remember myself, so that the first time you need a loan, yeah, that is the latest point where I say, okay, now I need a bank, or now I have questions, and now I have to make a calculation. Is it what can I afford and what not? But then, of course, it's too late. So, but what is the starting point? For the youth, when you go to school, you don't earn money, you don't need a loan. So what is the starting point to get responsibility for that? So the stock market game is one, I'm sure, but another one is, and coming back to the dialogue point I had, for example, Bitcoin, crypto, digital euro, all these words we hear in the digital world is new for everybody, for the young and for the old ones. And we all need to understand that, and that could be a starting point. And I think a starting point where the young people like to learn and the older ones have to learn.
Yes. I want to come back and hear more about the work that each of you are doing and some of the initiatives and programs you have launched. But does anybody have a question or indeed a comment to our panel? And can I ask you please to introduce yourself and please be brief? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Sebastian. I work for Erste Group, and I wanted to come back to the issue of financial influencers, of influencers. First and foremost, I agree with all fantastic panelists that financial education is the key and is the way to go for. However, to make the youth worldwide or in Europe more financially literate, that will take time, that will take years. So I was wondering whether there is something we need to do more immediately. And I'm thinking about whether there should be maybe more transparency in the system, that a financial influencer says, look, this is the company who's paying me, this is the remuneration I get, this is maybe the stake I have in this product. Or do we, maybe even go to so far as to say we need a certain authorization system that finfluencers need to have a license and only then they're allowed to operate? Thank you.
So does this need to be regulated as such, or more codes of conduct, codes of practice, which some might or might not follow? Please.
Thank you. I'm Dominique Cariou from EFPG. I have a simple question. So I'm
Whenever people say that, you know it's going to be really tricky.
So I'm a father of 2 years old, and I think that some of you mentioned, the role of the parents in, financial education or what should be done. So could you elaborate on this? Taking, some example, how do you see more the role of parents? Whether, it will be at a bank or, in the financial framework. That would be my question. Thank you.
Can I ask, if I might, Dominic, how old are your children?
2 years old.
Well, because one of my questions I wanted to ask you all was about when. Do you start? The framework starts at 6. Does it start? Is he right to be asking now what he should be doing? Any others while I'm still here?
My name is Stephanie Yuse, and I am and I am the advisor for the African region in WSPI. Also, I want to come back on the influencer thematic. I think one comment that you made that really kind of stuck in my mind, saying, I don't want to work, I just want to make a YouTube video. So I think a good question is really, what is work? And maybe with the new generation, we have a different view of what is work. Maybe we don't take influencing seriously because they don't need school to do it, but they definitely feel influenced, that they respond to a demand in the market. So I guess my question would be, what can those influencers, I would say, can bring to the school program in order, because it may seem like there is a gap in the school program that influencer might be able to help, or to support. And I would say, how can the older generation teach the younger generation on some thematic or words, especially digitalization, that they don't really master themselves? And would the young generation teach other young generation, or to also older generation? That's my question.
Thank you very much. And an interesting point there, because we tend to be focusing on the risks of influencers. But there is a suggestion, actually, they could play a very positive role if we can harness them, as it were. But then how do you do it? That links to the question we had earlier about, does some sort of regulation authorization system need to be put in place? Any others before we come back? Yes. Sorry, that's from sitting right in the front row. I missed you out.
Thank you so much. So Anna Hernandez from BBVA. I really wanted to thank you about all the comments that you said. It's very refreshing to actually take this topic and talk about it. So my question is, why do you think that youth and adults haven't really made an effort to be interested in finance? So is it because there's no reliable source? Is it maybe because we have fear of failing in investing, in taking loans? Is there maybe a behavioral cause in all of this? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's just pick up on that point, because before we talk about what we need to do, it's that motivation point, which I think was something, Carolyn, you talked about earlier, and we've addressed. What holds people back from getting the knowledge they need or being receptive to that?
It's a super good question, but thanks for having that, because it sounds so easy, just do it, deal with it, and be motivated. But I think it's a very complex topic. So I mean, I'm now for more than 20 years in the financial sector, and even for me, getting through inflation, digital euro, Bitcoin, crypto, loans, banking license, anti-money laundering. I don't know. There are so many things that I will say. Where's the what is the red line in it? So where do I start? I'm already lost actually, or I heard it a lot. Where is the starting point? Where do I start? And once you start, then it gets really difficult. Then you say, okay, when I understood that, then I have 10 more questions. And I think it really takes time and effort. And that is why a lot of people don't do it. And I think we have to do two things for them. We have to make it easy and say, look, you don't have to understand everything, but you have every day understand maybe a bit. And I think we need to talk in a different way about it. Yes, money and finances are important, but it's actually a good thing. It's not a risky thing. And I know that from a bank side, we are so much regulated that we can't talk in an easy way about it too. When I look at how are we regulated, because there are so many risks in the world, and we try to cover it all and to have the right capital for it, then there's always, let's say, a risk warning. There's something in it where you say, oh, if I got in touch with that, it's maybe not so good. So make it easy and make it positive.
I think, something the European Commissioner said at the launch of the framework, where she talked actually also about how it affects your life more broadly. How, if you are able to make sound financial decisions, how dramatic an impact it can have on your quality of life, on, and how much, if you're not able, how much it can damage. I was very struck by that as a way of selling it, as it were. It's not just about the money itself. It's about, and that's why we talk about it as a life skill.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Maybe one last comment to that. And I think deciding not to deal with it, or not being interested, or not putting an effort into learning it is a decision too. And maybe that is not the right decision to make. And that is what the commissioner said in the opening speech.
Absolutely.
Very impressive.
Very, very great. Just on this question of influencers, and it's something I also want to come back to with our second panel. But Anna, two questions there. One, really focusing on the risk of influencers, i.e. do we need to regulate them? Do we need to have some system of authorization? Not sure how in an open internet world one can regulate it. But on the other side, maybe they have a positive role to play. Can we harness them? How do you see that balance?
Even though I work at the Bank of Finland, so this is more my personal
sure.
point of view. So that I I am not in for this regulation concerning influencers because I think that this is a good phenomenon and they are doing great work in many areas. But what we need is critical media literacy. This is important. But what we have discussed in Finland that we have to get some kind of cooperation with these social influencers so that we can in a way use them in our work so that they can tell also our messages to the young people, so that I think that kind of cooperation with them could be fine, and I see that I see that we have not done this yet, but I think that there is quite a lot of opportunities in this area so that we can do cooperation with them.
Something to explore. From your point of view, Kristina, and then Roland, I want to come back to your central question and hear more about the work you're doing and how you are trying to implement this on the ground, because that's central. But just on this point about influencers and the pluses and minuses of...
I mean, I mentioned because we learn about it, the impact of these people having on young people, on young kids. You know, it's not that, we know that it exists. There is no really regulation now, but also there was a question on the regulation. I think in Europe, this is a very slow process. This will take ages, and by that time, new profession will come up. You know, and this is true. Now, and again, I'll repeat on the coalition on building on ecosystems of partners, of industry, of policy, of players on the ground. It's all about bringing people in education. Simulation is the learning point. No books. The books are there. The kids are already overloaded with different subjects in their regular education. But if we want to bring the financial education on any other, it's really by taking them, their curiosity, and taking them through a simulation. One of the things is the teachers. I think the least we spoke is the role of the teacher. How much the teacher needs to invest in their knowledge on the methodology of helping their kids to get through financial education. And for us, one of the main pillars as stakeholders are the teachers, so we invest a lot in teachers' trainings. Now, just one thing, Jake, I want to mention. When we look at the landscape of Europe, moving towards Eastern Europe, I'm coming from the Western Balkans originally myself, so there simulation goes within the class. 25 kids, one teacher. Moving this part of Europe, we get 5 kids per company. So the quality of education is completely different. How much is the quality impact on one kid when you work in a group of 25 or within 5? Again, we're talking about different educational systems. So it's really the quality we are providing the work. And just one recommendation to the father from a working mom of 2. When is the time to start? It's when the kids will start talking about, can I get a new bike again this week? Can I get next month? But you know, my friend has this bike. Can I get the pink bike or the blue bike? And this is when we need to start, comes from us, that we cannot buy a new bike every week. So we need to, this is the basic education of parenthood. Okay. And after that is the...
Okay. Let us move on, and we'll come back on the who needs to do what, that coalition you talked about later. But I want to hear some very practical, some of you have touched on them already, but Roland, in terms of the work that you are doing around the world, can you give us some examples of initiatives that have been, in your view, particularly effective? You said, we know what we need, we know what the skills are, they're basic, how do we get them to them? What are you doing? What have you discovered works from your work?
Allow me to give 10 seconds build on
yes, please do.
On the fatherhood. We actually start at the age of 3. We have a physical education package from 3 to 6-year-olds we call Aflatoun, and it's not only about money, it's delayed gratification, it's learning to close the tap, it's a broader concept. Secondly, we also have programs for young parents specifically in more vulnerable neighborhoods where we have positive parenting programs, where normally they learn about breastfeeding and other things, where we now also include financial education to use the money better to take care of the children.
Interesting. Thank you.
What are we doing at globally on programs to really make it happen? We have a sort of two-pronged approach. First of all, we work with focusing on the most vulnerable children, which have already fallen between the cracks of the education systems. We're talking about programs for vulnerable girls, teenage pregnancy, HIV/AIDS, child labor, child marriage. We have a growing number of programs, organizations around the world who target these specific problems and are starting to realize that we're missing something. And what they're missing is that financial empowerment of these girls to make much more informed decisions and have alternatives. I can do something else than having a sugar daddy. These ways of managing your money in a way so that you can reduce your risk. Because as you said, it's not only about better money management later in life. These adolescents are transitioning not only from school to work, but also from childhood to adulthood. And all the risks in life are during that age group. So what we're seeing, and more and more academic research is showing, that you also have a reduction in teenage pregnancies, reduction in communicable diseases and others. So it's really important to focus from that lens, from the public health lens as well. So we have these programs with these mainly NGOs, cooperatives, focused on specific groups, but at the same time, we're saying for those kids which haven't fallen between the cracks yet, if you want to reach them at scale, you will reach them at primary, early secondary school through the education system, so that every child who's going to school gets these basic financial skills. And there you need to work with the ministries of education, the central banks, and all the key stakeholders in the country. It's a very steep uphill battle, and it indeed takes years. It's not something you fix within a year. It is a long journey, but it's the only way to go if you want to have systematic, funded, scaled programs.
And just a question, if you might, have you learned anything about what doesn't work? Is there anything you've tried and thought, no, so can we learn from failure here at all?
The biggest challenge is the teachers, in the sense of orienting them to teaching financial education. But the biggest one is then, if you have a commitment of everybody in the country to integrate financial education into the school system, you need to teach the teachers to manage money, and then you need to teach them to teach the kids about money. And that is a major investment. That's not a small thing, because the teachers are the biggest workforce in the country, and they all need to be reoriented towards financial education. So that is the biggest challenge. I can tell you about a lot of lessons learned over the past, but that's the biggest one.
Come back on that. But Anu, some examples of the sort of things you've been doing, what has really worked, and if there is anything that really hasn't.
Something that really works, that we are doing teacher further education in financial issues every year with our stakeholders, and then we have annually more than 200 teachers there at this two-day course, education course. So that is really important, because we are delivering newest information about financial situation in Finland, and also research results from financial education and financial literacy and that kind of thing. So that kind of material that teachers can use immediately at their work. And some concrete that we are doing all the time at the Bank of Finland, we as employees can work as volunteers to teach the young people who are marginalized. So we are teaching them financial issues, and that is something that we I have also been there involved, and you see concretely that you can help a person. It is not much, but it is something that gives a lot.
And that's going into schools, or how do you do it? How does it work?
It is a Deaconess Foundation which coordinates this so that they have as a client or customers, they have a kind of young people who have had some problems in their life, and they are those young people, we are helping them.
And have you learned any lessons about what doesn't work?
Something that I don't know how well it works, because we have financed also this kind of open economic course, and it is open on the internet, so that students in secondary level education can use them, so that we know that it is. We see that the course is well done, but we don't know how much it is used. So because it was quite a lot of resources to do this course, so we want to know more how effective this course has been, but we don't know that.
And that raises an interesting point, which I hope we can come to in our second panel, about how do we monitor progress? How do we develop the right indicators to know if it's working? Caroline, you talked about simulations, but other examples of the sort of work you're doing?
Yes, maybe to give two, I find very, very nice examples that work very well. And one is we do lectures for schools and teachers, and the schools and teachers can book it free of charge. So if there is a need of financial education, financial literacy, they can give us a push, and we come there and give them more information, insight. So we're doing like a school lesson for them, and we are going into the schools, and we have really qualified people who are doing it. That is very, very nice, and it's a very flexible model. I think that is very good too. And the other thing is, because we also need to focus on not only the youth, it's financial education never stops. So we always have the lifelong learning column, and there we have the so-called consumer consulting services, and this exists since 1958, so really a long time ago. And that I find very interesting. It was implemented by women, and you mentioned the sugar daddy. We may say the main risk is the sugar daddy. The women said in the 1950s, they said, look, the men are going to work. We do the household. We have to buy bread, butter to get the kids ready, and so how does the income and the costs match? And they started it. Very basic questions with a very basic two-column paper actually, but this is implemented until now. Now it looks a bit different and it's getting more and more complex, but it is consumer consulting services. And we saw just last year, when the inflation and the interest rates were raising up, we saw an increase, because everybody was all of a sudden, what are increasing interest rates mean for us? What does it do for our loans, for our rent, and so on? So now it gets a kind of a revival, and that is a very nice thing, a very important thing, I think.
And that issue of women was the focus of our discussions last year, and quite striking. You talked about, when we talk about levels of literacy, even lower among young women than among young men, an issue to address. But KRISTINA, you've already given us quite a lot of examples of what you're doing. I don't know if you want to add anything there, but I wanted also to touch on this point about the coalition. You said that ecosystem of partners, what for each of you? So as we look forward, and we've talked about the role of parents, the role of teachers, your own roles, but how do we, a thought from all of you, starting with you, KRISTINA, on how do we build that coalition, that ecosystem? Do we have enough of it now? And if we don't, what do we need to do?
I think we do have, because there are initiatives all over Europe. So I think the willingness is there. There are a lot of frameworks existing on paper, strategies put on paper, not really moving into implementation. I think these are, as I mentioned, we work with 60 financial institutions across Europe in 40 countries. This is already part of the ecosystem. Players like Aflatoun, even the national banks. I know many national banks really tackling the financial education, going into school and teaching young people. One of the best examples I want to give, it's also when the government comes and sees this as a financial, as a main strategy on embedding financial education within the system. Norway is one of them. The Norwegian government has invested in junior achievement in Norway, saying every kid in secondary school should go through the junior achievement program, secondary. In Albania, which is other side of Europe, still in developing right country, candidate country to EU, there we have 100% penetration, because the government saw the need. And now every kid in secondary school should go through this simulation just because the government saw as one of the way to tackle on further development of financial education and skills and competencies of young people. And just to finish, Jackie, on this, on the parents. So as I mentioned previously, the company program, 3 stakeholders groups, kids, teachers, parents. We did a lot of research, and actually we did with the Ministry of Education of Latvia, Finland, some years ago. What it shows, we took 2 groups. One group, the kids that are going through the company program, another group, kids that are not participating to anything, to any financial education program. The kids, the finding was that the kids that were part of our simulation of the program, they were getting less sick, less medical absences at school because they were highly motivated to work in team with their mates, with their classmates, into providing solutions. We were bringing volunteers from the business sector. This is huge stimul for young people to really understand how the world of work works. Because the teacher itself, this person has never gone through a business experience, never went through really financial education, but just besides some trainings that we are providing is a matter of capacity building.
Thank you very much. Roland, you wanted to talk earlier a little bit about lessons learned. Please do touch on that. But on this question, and you talked about areas where you really have to work with governments and work with, on this question of building those coalitions, the working together, what for you is the key to what works there, what doesn't, the ingredients for really good collaboration?
The ingredient of successful integration of financial education is having both the financial sector, the central banks on board, but on the other side, which is the more difficult side, is the education sector on board.
The more difficult side, because?
I'll come to that if you allow me to give 1 minute. But like next week, we are bringing in Amsterdam 25 governments where the central banks and the Ministry of Education have said we want to do financial integrating with the education. Once you have them on board, you take them on process. It takes 3-5 years, but it will happen. The biggest challenge, but I engaged with each country individually because there is no international framework within the education sector where there is a commitment towards financial education. I don't know if you have, I mean, most of us here are coming from the financial sector, but last year the UN Secretary General called for a global summit in New York about transforming education because there is a realization education is slow, it's old, out of touch with the reality. If you look, of course, UNESCO's, the UNICEF, the World Bank, they took the lead in organizing the conference. They all talk about climate change and digital skills, but nobody talks about financial skills. Well, it comes together. So we, to be honest, we approached UNESCO and said, listen, we need to talk about financial skills. We wrote a letter with 120 organizations which signed the letter. We need to talk about financial skills at the Transforming Education Summit. They didn't even take the effort to respond. UNICEF didn't respond to us. The only ones who was the World Bank. The World Bank said, you're right, but it's not our responsibility. Then we took it up and to write to the Secretary General of the UN ourselves directly. And interestingly enough, his office said, actually, you have a point. Why don't you come to New York and present about financial skills? So we actually went last year, Aflatoun, and we had a session at the Transforming Education Summit at the headquarters. The room was half empty because they were all focusing on numeracy and literacy. But then at the outcome statement of the Secretary General, and many of you are not aware of it, he included youth need a different skill set at this stage of age, and financial skills is one of them. So we really need to use that statement for our lobby and advocacy. After the Transforming Education Summit finished, UNESCO went back and they continued about digital skills, climate skills, and there's no reference to financial skills. Everybody has its own agenda, also the UNICEF and others. What I do think what should be done is we need to be mindful. If you talk about climate skills and you expect people, young fishermen in West Africa, not to fish the ocean empty or not to chop the tropical forest in Indonesia, you need to give them other means to make a living. So climate education and financial education go hand in hand. It's about responsible resource management.
And you talked about the education system being the challenging part of all of this, the school within. What have you learned about the challenge and how to overcome it briefly, if you would? Yeah.
Basically, when we knock on the door with the curriculum department of Ministry of Education, they said, get lost, we've done this for 50 years, it's fine. Or get in the queue because we have climate education, digital skills, international people who want to do it. The advantage we have is because in the political economy in countries, central banks are much more powerful. And then we go to the central bank, and the central bank, it's the opposite. They pull us in, they hug us and say, where have you been? We need to teach people about finance. The central bank opens the door for us with financial education.
Yeah,
and
I have to get Anu to come back on this. Do you want to hug? What for you, Anu, listening to that and listening to the challenges, what for you is the key to really working effectively together? You were saying earlier, we haven't worked with influence, but something we need to look at. Where would your focus be in terms of making this ecosystem of partnerships that KRISTINA talked about really work?
I think that the situation is similar in various countries, that teachers at school, they are a little bit unsecure when teaching financial education. And I see that this can be supported by many stakeholders. As I mentioned, that we are giving this further education in financial issues annually. But also in Finland, we have a really good experience that financial companies, they are, for instance, organizing workshops at schools. And it is really important that this activity is uncommercial, so that they are only teaching those financial skills, but not selling any financial products of them. But this kind of cooperation, it is really so that teachers really warmly welcome this kind of activity, so that they can get a kind of new information about financial environment, and students at school, they can learn financial skills which are not taught at school by teachers.
KAROLIN, the partnership. What do we need to do? How do we build on the work you're already doing? But you've talked about some of the ways in which you do get involved. How do we build on that?
And we do exactly what you mentioned, or we try to go there, and if you call it the green, digital, and social, it's really the combination of all, because sustainability, I think that is the way to go. There is no alternative, but we need digital skills for that. We can't ignore AI or other developments. And with social, that is exactly, and I like it very much what you said. We need the social skills as well. That is financial education, but also talking about alternatives. What is if we can't invest in this? What does it mean? And what is the alternative to make out a living? Or and we were in Marrakesh on the World Bank conference a few days ago. And I had it was really like an aha erlebnis. I had a very, very interesting conversation there with countries, not from Europe, from the US and other, and Africa as well. And that was very interesting. We talked a lot about sustainability. And for me as a European, I was like thinking of EU taxonomy and all the numbers we have to crunch and to report to the authorities. And they were talking about the same issues, but without any number crunching or data putting from one end to the other thing. They were really on the focus, what needs to be done. And then it turned out that they don't have the big issue with the E, with the climate. It was the S, like social. And then we were all of a sudden we had a discussion about financial education. How do we keep the kids in the country? What is the industry that should come to us to have the right work for our people, that we can make our country powerful. And that was the right discussion we have in Europe, but coming from the other side without an EU taxonomy. And that was for me, it's like green, digital and social, that goes hand in hand. And I think that counts worldwide.
Thank you very much indeed. So I want to put all of you on the spot now before we break for coffee. And it's a slightly unfair question, so I think I'm going to try to make it a little bit easier. So really, what I'm trying to drive at here is where do we go from here? What do we need to do next? And I want to go back to what we heard right at the beginning about the results are not what we would have hoped for, what we might have expected. And as Montserrat said, we have a long way to go. Some good work, and you're all doing great things in this area, but it's not yet really delivering the results for each of you. And I was going to ask you for a top priority for action. Maybe I'll make it a bit easier by saying the key next step of all the things we've talked about and accepting it's complex. I think we started with that. It's multifaceted. It's not, there is no silver bullet. So I'm not asking for a silver bullet, but for each of you, and I'll just go straight down the line, key next step, Roland, if we really need to make progress on this.
The key next step is bring the education sector at the table. If you look in the room, we are mostly finance. If you look at the speech of UNESCO, with all due respect, there was no mentioning of real financial education at national level. We really need to bring the education sector on board.
Christina.
And if the education doesn't want to come, we go to them, because that's we are the mountain, right? They're Muhammad. So then, yeah, I could totally agree. The education should be here. We should hear also their challenges, and one of the things is that financial education is cross-cutting. When I started with junior achievement, I started to work on STEM, science, technology, education. Financial is there. Yesterday, we are running 700 kids between Africa and Europe on Foodathon, on water management and food resilience. It's all about financial education. How do you make that visible and sustainable? So it's there in any format you want to turn.
Thank you, Karolin.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yesterday, just our financial minister restarted the national financial education series to adapt the OECD framework and also on. So we are here very, very active. And I think the first priority is bring financial education into the schools and stop talking about the youth, talk to the youth and include them.
Thank you very much. We're going to hear a lot more about the framework. I haven't concentrated on it so much in this conversation because we're going to hear more about it from a speaker from the OECD after the coffee break, and we'll build on that. Anna, you have the last word. Your key priority, key next step.
I also agree with recent speakers, but what I would like to point out that it is important to have this financial education in all stages of educational system. At least in Finland, vocational schools, they lack financial education. And in that kind of schools, it is really important that they have also financial education. And I would also like to encourage schools to open their doors to experts so that they can utilize the good work done by NGOs and also financial companies.